Welcome to the Bleep Midlife Bulimia podcast with guest Sherry T, owner of ProsperUs. Hi everyone, I am Lorianne. I am the host of Bleep Midlife Bulimia. Today I have Sherry T, and she is the owner of ProsperUs. And we're going to be speaking today about some of Sherry's experiences with bulimia and where she is at today. And thank you so much for being here with me.
Oh, Lorianne, it's such a privilege for me. So thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. So let's start with that. I know that you struggle with bulimia, and let's just start with where that all started with you.
Sure. So I bulimia started with me in my, I want to say mid-teen years. I don't quite remember exactly when, but it started in, probably around 16, I'm going to say. And it got really bad between, I'm going to say between 18 and 21. It was stress induced. You and I were talking yesterday, and the interesting thing that I found with bulimia is that a lot of women, or I guess some men as well, but a lot of women suffer from it as a means to lose weight. And even though that was a factor for me, it was more of an emotional response for me, and an emotional release. I liken it a lot to people who cut themselves. And when they feel overwhelmed, just to feel something or be in control of something, it really was about control for me. So that that's when it started. I would like to say that I'm mostly recovered now. I relapse probably about once or twice a year.
Okay, yeah, I always like to say too, if it's just the once or twice a year, you've come leaps and bounds and definitely towards full recovery, because that is something. And then we were also, when we chatted, because, okay, I'm going to tell my listeners, I had to read this one. We had a great conversation yesterday. Let me tell you, it was so beautifully. And of course, my sound sucked. So I couldn't have your ears hurt with this, but we're going to go through some of this. And what we talked about yesterday, just a lot of things, but that go-to definitely for emotions, and the weight thing being possibly the start of it, but definitely something that I know personally myself. I also started going to numb myself from emotions, or I didn't like feeling something, so I would run to food to just, comfort and
Yeah.
hide whatever I was feeling. But I also really truly believe that, even when I was feeling after my recovery, I would feel triggers. I would not act on them. But I feel fully recovered today where I'm not even feeling those triggers anymore, which is where you're obviously getting to, which is fantastic. And I really appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that.
Well, they say hindsight's 2020, and that's so the truth with me, because when I was going through it and the worst of it, I never understood why I was doing it. It was just something I did. And here's the funny thing. I didn't recognize it in myself, and yet my best friend was horribly anorexic, to the point where, she was a walking stick, and with this, disproportionate sized head, because there was nothing to her, and she had to be hospitalized. She was so close to dying. And I would look at her in, admittedly and shamefully, a judgmental way, like, why can't you just get over this? And, what's wrong with you? And why can't you just eat? And yet, I was at the worst of my bulimia. I couldn't even see it in myself. And I didn't understand why I was doing it. So, you talk about triggers. I had no idea what my triggers were. I would be going through stress, and I wouldn't correlate it with the need to binge and purge and binge and purge. And, and it went on for like 4 or 5 times a day at my worst times, but I couldn't recognize it in myself.
Now, that's interesting, because I know I was reading back through a couple of my journals, and it started off, I was really quite pleased with having bulimia myself, because I had lost, I guess probably about 20 pounds that I gained. And then in the journal start to say, I wanted to reach out to my friends to say, I want to stop this because it had taken over. It was no longer about the weight anymore. It was something I was going to. But like you, I didn't associate it right away with emotions. It took a little bit of
Yeah.
time for me to do that. And I felt alone all of a sudden thinking, well, who do I turn to? Because they all, knew when I was starting, because it was almost like a game, strangely enough. And it was like, oh, well, I'm going to try it too, but I can't do it. And then they would come to me, go, you really shouldn't do it. And then I started pretending I wasn't doing it anymore, just so that they wouldn't be bugging me. And so when it got to that point, where do I reach out to? Who do I speak to when you're sitting there going, I really don't want to be doing this, but I don't know that I don't want to be doing this, and I need someone to talk to. And that was an interesting transition. And like you said, when you finally do put the two and two together, where do you go?
Well, there's so much shame. Well, I don't want to talk in generalities like I'm talking for everybody, but for me, there was a lot of shame with it because, first of all, I didn't think I had bulimia because, I said I didn't recognize it in myself. I think it's kind of like being an alcoholic and you think you can stop at any time. So therefore, you are not an alcoholic. So throwing up was just something I did. I didn't view it as a disease or anything like that. So I went from not understanding it to being ashamed of having it when I finally did admit it to myself. Because, you grow up I grew up in a very religious household from a religion that I've left. And it's a culture of shame and not good enough and, and needing to portray perfection in everything you do in your whole life. So when I did admit that I had bulimia, I couldn't tell anyone. It was now became about, now I can get through this on my own. Now I have to stop, but I can't let anyone know until, of course, I'm better.
And which is hard to do if you have nobody to support you to get better sometimes. So you could keep saying, well, next year, next day, next something. And interesting about the anorexia, because we talked about that too, where I had a friend and she would be walking and I'm going, oh my goodness. And it was painful to watch her where it was all skin and bones. And like you, I would think like, can't you just gain something? And yet here I was bulimic, but I guess I was started almost thinking, well, but I'm okay because I've got extra weight on me and no one can see it. And yet it's been told it's a slow form of suicide.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we don't see it nearly as much because a lot of bulimics are not hospitalized because, there are a lot that are, but there's a lot that aren't because they maintain a certain weight. They maintain, this to be able to consistently keep going. I did that over 30 years. So obviously that's the case, and not without, the end results of things that, like I have a problem with my esophagitis and my teeth are not as nice as they used to be. So there were consequences thereof.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the lucky ones because I know that there's people, being in my 40s, I could have had a heart attack based on the pressure that bulimia did. And I don't want to scare my listeners, but it's the older you get, seriously, it's going to be a bigger problem health-wise. Not that it isn't always, but it is going to get worse because your heart isn't as strong as you get older. Unless, well, some athletes would argue me with that one, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's
The health implications are huge. And I don't know that I would have started well, actually, no, I probably would have started knowing it because you're too young back then to worry about repercussions. But my God, like the dentist bills and, and the hormone fluctuations that you go through at the worst of it. I know that you suffered from that. I was lucky that I didn't have a lot of people around me to lash out to, but for sure the health implications, I can't imagine being full blown now with bulimia. I just couldn't.
No, I can tell you there were a couple of times in the latter part of just before I was recovering, where it was kind of scary because, and so one of a lady who, of course, midlife. Okay, we're laughing about that too. We don't like to be called midlife. We don't feel midlife. I personally, I'm in my last quarter of my life, so I want to make sure that it's a happy one. But hitting in my 40s and my heart pounding like that. And I had a hard time going to sleep because I'm thinking, oh my, if this keeps up, am I going to wake up tomorrow? And then of
Yeah.
course you've got your panic attacks, and of course you're not having the proper nutrients to help you in a lot of those. So you're most likely dehydrated, which is not good for your heart, the lack of nutrients, which is not good for your heart. And you're thinking, I didn't think about this. Like, I didn't think this was going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's compounded.
Yeah.
It's compounded because you still have all the issues that made you bulimic. Like, I was thinking back to, why it started for me. And of course, as I was talking about the need for that image of perfection, but I was such a stressed out kid. I remember in elementary school, my mom took me to the doctor because I was having all of these stomach issues, and the doctor examined me and he says, what on earth do you have at your age to be this stressed out about? So I was always like a strung out kid. And, because I internalized everything. It's so on top of the physical effects of bulimia, you're compounding it with everything else that was wrong that made you start being bulimic. So it's no joke, man.
No, and funny that you should say that. I keep saying we were referencing because I'm referencing that, but it's true. And it brought back this when I was like up till 3 years old. I loved showing off, loved being out there, and I would be shy but not shy. And then the minute I got to know you, you wish that you hadn't known me because I didn't shut up and I was all excited and everything. But I didn't see that as a negative, except for when, the adults would say that, hey, calm down, go sit down, don't bug them. And so I started perceiving myself as bugging people, being annoying. And I remember that. And then, like you said, too, I think it was in grade 2, I remember trying to do a math problem, couldn't get it. And I took my pencil and I scraped really hard over it because I was so frustrated. And then what do? Just like what you do with bulimia, you hide it. You try and pull the paper off, right? And I didn't want them to see this. But then, of course, there's the ingrained part underneath that my teacher saw, and she told my mom. And my mom was upset with me. And instead of trying to figure out what was it that was causing the anger? Why did I do that? Again, because I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be number 1 in the class. I wanted to make sure that I knew everything that I was learning, and sometimes overthinking would make me think that something was more difficult than it actually was, and it would frustrate me because I wasn't making the marks, right? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into bulimia for sure. But thank God. I really appreciate the work you do around it, though. Because when you speak it, you take away its power. You really do. Like, you were telling me how when you start to feel triggered, you call your sister, and then she would talk. Well, she wouldn't even need to talk you off the ledge. You wouldn't need it after just telling her. So speaking about it, as long as you're not re-victimizing yourself, speaking about it takes away its power. And that was really a lot of where I went wrong. It could have ended a long time ago for me, like way earlier than it did, had I just had the courage to speak about it. So, your platform is brilliant. I love what you do.
Thank you. And that's funny because we talked about that, and that's where I started laughing, because when I did call my sister that one time and I said, I want to binge and purge. And by this time I was probably, I don't know, just a few months into my recovery. And she goes, it's okay, you can do it. And that bothered me. I go, no, I'm not going to do it then, because you're letting me. I'm not going to let this argument of like, yeah, tell me I can do it, then I'm not going to. No, it's not good. And that was really, like, that was pivotal for me, because all of a sudden somebody was letting me do it. Somebody was accepting me with the fact that, call me after it's done, let me know. Made me realize, and unfortunately for you, but and for me too, because it took me that long. I mean, really, ultimately, this was just at my recovery and the time that helped me recover. And not a lot of people out there feel they have anyone to talk to about it. And I would imagine you hit it really well throughout your life.
I was discovered in my late teens. Someone, I forget who, it's too long ago, but somebody heard me throwing up, and my parents approached me And so, of course, there's nothing worse than disappointing your parents. So I had to promise that I would stop. And I turned anorexic for a little while because I promised my parents I wouldn't binge and purge. So then I just wasn't going to eat. I had to control something, right? And then they had to deal with that. So my God, I'm sorry, mom and dad. I was so hard on you. I'm sorry.
Okay, straight James. I said that to my dad just a couple of days ago.
Oh my
I
God.
said, I never apologized for putting you through what you had to go through. But dad took it easier than mom, believe it or not. He knew how to deal with it better than my mom could. I don't know if you had one parent that was, I mean, it's hard on any parent, but it was interesting how dad tried to go about it versus how my mother went about it, which was more with anger, whereas my dad was more with let's try and make her, because I kind of went through that period too, them finding out, then me saying then I'm not going to eat anything, and then dad trying to get me to eat slowly but surely, just a little bit at a time. He was happy if I just ordered a salad and watched me eat a couple leaves of lettuce. Like it was
Oh my God.
with
I'd love to tell you. I'd love to tell you that I remember how my parents reacted, but I was so self-absorbed in what was going on with me because it was intermixed with horrible depression and so on. And it didn't even occur to me to be worried about how this was affecting anyone else. This was all about me, and because it was about self-loathing and it was about control and overwhelm. It was all of these things that just put blinders on me. I couldn't, I hear people talk about other people who have depression and they get angry with them. And I think I put bulimia in the same category, and they get angry with them. How could they be so selfish? And why can't they understand what we're going through? But I'm here, like I want to tell people, they don't give a shit. They can't. They are so incapable. If you're really bad, and I know I'm generalizing again, but that was my experience. I was so incapable of it to think of anything but my own darkness.
That's true. Yeah, you did go through that, and I don't even know if you weren't like, even if you wanted to reach out, you wouldn't. It's hard to even imagine doing that when you're in that.
It didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
Did not even occur to me as a choice. It wasn't, and in fact, I never reached out for help ever. Well, no, that's not true. I did, for my depression, go see some psychiatrists, and I just offhandedly said that I throw up sometimes. And they wanted to explore it, and I wanted to ignore it, and then they wanted to blame the religion, but I was still drinking the Kool-Aid, so I changed therapists like I don't know how many times because they didn't talk about what I wanted to talk about. But yeah, other than that, I did not reach out to friends or anyone for any help.
You got a really good point there too, because I was even saying that sometimes when it comes to even being bulimic, it can have a better effect too if you're not speaking to the person about their eating disorder or whatever. Is to speak to them what they want to speak about. I think is incredibly important. I like what you just said there.
Yeah, for me, I didn't ever address my bulimia head on. It wasn't about, I need to stop binging and purging. I didn't fix that. I just got happy. Like I just had to work on healing, all of my emotional wounds, because there's a whole other story about my family. But so I had to heal the emotional wounds. And as I was healing and getting happier, the bulimia took care of itself. Like you cannot be a whole complete happy person and be bulimic, in my opinion. It just, the two don't, because here is self-loathing and here's self-love. You learn the self-love, it doesn't coexist with self-loathing, and it took care of itself.
And I know that there's some people will argue this with me, but there is that self-love there inside of everybody. They just have to uncover it. And some people say, no, 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 I never loved myself. But intrinsically, there is that there for people to discover, but you have to want to.
Yes, yes. And then for the people observing, you have to just recognize when they're actually asking for help, because it usually 99% of the time does not sound like I need help. You know, people ask for help in very weird, twisted ways, but because they can't say the words.
And if they do say I need help, be there for them. Because that's one
Yeah.
thing we had talked about. I mean, you know, God bless. It's probably scary for some, but I remember when I was married and I was going for help on my own, because I did. There were a few times I went to see therapists because I was there and wanted to say, hey, like, help me. And I asked my ex-husband if he would come with me, and he declined. And that made me feel alone. It made me feel unsupported. And even if I had you know, I wanted someone close to me, someone who was in my world, to be a little
Yeah.
bit there and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And you may not be able to understand it, but at least hold my hand through it. And I've heard of women that are married and their husbands are fantastic. But again, we can't expect them to know exactly what to do, but just be there is
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head, and I cannot emphasize what you said enough. You know, when I ended up in the hospital, not for my bulimia, but it had gotten so bad indirectly that I had attempted to take my life. And so I was in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, my mom had no idea how to handle me, because they come from the very stoic old European way where they don't show emotion. So I'm sure I fried her circuitry trying to handle me. And all she did was she would spend day after day after day sitting on the couch with my head on her lap, stroking my hair, or she was making me soup. Yeah, and I can't go on with that story because it'll make me cry. But all you need to do is just be there. Just be there. You don't have to fix it. You don't even have to understand it. And for God's sake, don't tell them to just eat something, because it's not about that. Just be there. Hold the
Well,
space for them.
it's like that opposite that I was talking about. So if you tell them to eat something, they are not going to want to. And if you force them to eat something, odds are, and I'm talking about all ages, doesn't matter what bulimic you are, if you're not in that area of being better again, you're just going to, yeah, I'll eat it then. And guess where it's going to end up? And and then there was the twist when my sister said, yeah, go ahead. You can binge and throw up. I'm here for you. And I'm going, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, so is that telling me you can't? No, I don't want you to. Uh, you know, if that's what you need to do it. I'm here for you. And that just threw me off. It literally threw me off. So I'm sitting there, somebody's telling me it's, she wasn't saying it was okay to do it. It's okay if you need to do it. I'm still there. I'm not going to judge you if you do it. And that was crazy. And I thought, yeah.
Well, because you judge yourself horribly to begin with for doing it, because you know, like the self-loathing and the self-judgment is a drug in itself that you go through. So to hold the space without the judgment, like your sister did, like I just want to give her a hug for responding like that. Like brilliant, brilliant. Just say, I don't want you to, but it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, just call me
I
after.
don't want you to. That's what's so crazy. I was waiting for her to say, I don't want you to. She just said, it's okay.
Yeah. The enormity of that love that she had for you in that moment, it really is moving.
Absolutely. And it taught me a lot. It's, you know, it's not always the only way. That's one thing we do have to understand, that every person who's dealing with bulimia or any eating disorder of any kind, there are different ways, you know, that for recovery and for coming through it. But we always say that number one, you have to want to. And
Yes.
I believe in what you're saying is that being happy and learning to, you know, love yourself. And I'm not just saying just like yourself or saying you're enough. I hate to be, that hate's a really bad word. I really somehow dislike those you're good enough, because being good enough is not good enough for you. You've got
Yes.
to be and I won't say the best that you can be, but you've got to love yourself as best as you can, and all together there. You're there from the day you were born to the day you die, 24/7. You are going to be the one. And most likely, when you look in a mirror, you're not going to annoy yourself as much as you annoy your friends. But the nice thing is you don't annoy yourself as much, so you can live with that. I always love that
Well
one.
said.
Because I think sometimes when I'm alone, I'm going, I really like this because I really love being with myself and I don't judge me.
Yeah.
And I look in the mirror and I think I'm kind of cool and I like being with me. And,
Yeah.
now I've learned that if somebody else doesn't want to, that's okay. I'm not going to
Yes.
force you to. Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that a beautiful place to be finally?
Well,
I mean, it was a hard road to get here, sister, but you know, I I love it. If I had known how great it felt to really have esteem for myself, man, I would have started long ago. It feels amazing.
right. There's something. How do you teach that? I think they're trying a lot better in schools for that. I mean, unfortunately, we still have the bullying, and I know that uh, social media has not been the best in regards to eating disorders either. In fact, they said that it worsened. I thought, having magazines was bad enough, but now they've got these. And then we spoke to another one of my guests who said that, sometimes people even try to compete at how bad it is. And it is an attention getting thing. But as I said to you, I was grateful that I didn't have a severe case like I've seen
Yeah.
out there. I feel that I don't know if it was something that made the ease of recovery better because I was never, I mean, yes, at one time it was like 10 to 12 times, but I think that lasted maybe about 3 months when I was in my 20s. But for the most part, I wasn't an extremist when it came to that. And I would never even want to be in that category that says, I'm worse than you. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't want.
But even those people that compete for it, that's just a different kind of wound. That need for attention is just them being wounded in a different way than you, and they deserve as much compassion. It's more annoying, but they deserve as much compassion as anyone, as the person who stays silent.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I feel bad I know that there's different levels. I mean, there's
Yeah.
children who are rebels without a cause, who are looking for the attention. It's a negative attention, but they're getting it. And the more attention they get from it, that's my only concern is the more that they get attention for being worse, whether it's a rebel without a cause or having a worse disorder and they're getting the attention, as long as they get that attention, I think it makes it harder to turn it around. Does that make any sense?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I've said like more than once on this show, I wish I could go back and, and fix it. But the truth is, I don't think I would, if I'm being really honest, because, especially if we're watching other people go through it, we just want to make them better. I am so grateful for every scar, every wound, every piece of shit that I went through, because it made me who I am today, and it made me more empathetic to people and able to relate to people who have gone through difficult things. And so, for people who are watching or listening to this who do know of somebody going through it and they're so frustrated, just remember it's not about you. And just watch them go through their journey. However it ends, it's their journey, and they are polishing themselves like beautiful jewels that they are. And the more they go through, the more beautiful they'll be in the end. So have some, have the compassion, do try to help, hold the space, but just give them the space for their journey, because that is exactly what it is. I wouldn't change anything about me. I don't hold resentment for anything I went through. And I wouldn't change anything about you. I think you're a wonderful, beautiful person. And you wouldn't be doing this podcast helping so many had you not had your own difficulties.
you're
Right?
absolutely right. And I'm incredibly grateful as well because along with everything, my bulimia never stopped me from living. And there was a time when I first recovered, and I don't know if you felt like this as well, but I thought, oh my goodness, the time wasted, the food wasted, the money wasted, this wasted. And then I put a portrait of my life together and thinking, but even with all that, look what you accomplished and where you've come to. And it was staggering that you can look at the positives of your life and put aside the negative of it. And like you just said, find the positive.
Yeah.
That where it brought you to.
Yeah.
I love
your win was sweeter because your battle was harder.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah.
And yours too. Your story is wonderful. And for any of the listeners out there, we do have more of Sherry's story on Lift Your Story podcast, which I am a co-host on with Roy. And we really appreciated having Sherry on that one too, with a little bit of a different twist to a story to this one, but I hope that you listen to it as well. And Sherry, if you can please tell our listeners about a little bit more about you, your business, and where they can find you.
Sure. So the ProsperUs group deals with the administrative professionals arena. So I recruit, I coach, and I train administrative professionals, and I help executives work better with their administrative or executive assistants. The reason why this is so important to me, which doesn't seem connected to things like bulimia or depression or any of the other stuff that we talked about in the other podcast, but it comes back again to why it made me the way it made me. And administrative professionals are so subservient, so they're just in these places of servitude to other people, and it sometimes wears them down, grinds them down, or they started there and that's just what they feel that they need to do. So I love coaching them. And it's my passion. Anytime I'm in a coaching call, we rarely end up talking much about the job, because I help them to understand you have to fix the personal before you can flourish in the professional. And that's what we tackle. And, I love to think that I'm really, really good at it because of what I've been through. That's where I shine. So I love my company, the ProsperUs group. I love the people that I work with, and I love getting them to see the worth in themselves.
That's wonderful. And so they can find you on www.ProsperUs.
Correct.
Not O-U-S, U-S.
Correct. Yeah. ProsperUsgroup.com. I can also be reached, if anybody wanted to reach out by email, even if it wasn't about, work, if something that we've talked about resonated with someone and you just want to talk, Sherry@ProsperUsgroup.com, reach me. I'm happy to give you some time.
That's fantastic. Really appreciate this. The other thing too, I wanted to just let your listeners know, which I was also really impressed with, is it's not just deal with the executive assistants, but the relationship with the executives as well.
Correct.
Alongside of that, so that you can work more in tandem with each other rather than, the old, boss and secretary kind of thing. Which I think is really important. And we, of course, relate that to, I have to say it, but the suits, Donna and Harvey.
I love that. Yeah.
Right? We love that.
It's kind of, what I do is kind of like professional marriage counseling.
Exactly. And I do believe that that's important, because believe it or not, my first positions coming out of university thinking I was going to conquer the world were as an executive assistant. And it's not always easy in that role of being subservient, so to speak, as the word would say it, particularly if you do have ambitions, and then you start to feel that you're not reaching where you wanted to be at. So this is where, Sherry, I know you help out with that. So that's wonderful. Love having you. Thank you so much again for being here.
Lorianne, you're amazing, and it was such a privilege to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.